Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's July 12th, 2023. Got some things done this morning, and I thought what we do is just go up and look at the second food forest. A little bit embarrassed by how it looks and all because I'm so far behind, but we'll just go take a look at it. So this morning, one of the things I did do was I went up and I removed a lot, took Pepe here. This is our old utility vehicle here, and I really love this guy. Took our tree tubes off of many of the trees from up there and had to bring the ladder up so that I could work on the help to rectify a leaning Chinese chestnut tree. That was a hybrid that was really leaning over quite a bit. So I used a 2x2 to do that. So let's take a look at the second food forest up here. So this is the part of the soil collecting swale system that goes around and feeds into a canal over there. And we're in the front of the house. There's the front garden in the front area. And there's several swales going up through the second food forest here. And it's just loaded with weeds here. I've got a lot of work to do down here. We have quite a few dwarf trees here, some dwarf apple trees. That's actually a pecan there. Another dwarf apple tree, honey locust. I believe this is a semi-dwarf apple. Crimson maple tree, staghorn sumac. Redbud. This is one of the few redbuds that actually hasn't snapped as a result of the high winds, potentially because this is so well protected in this area. Another semi-dwarf apple here, I'm sorry, that's a dwarf apple, a pecan, black currant, weeping cherry, another apple, another crimson maple here, apple, cherry, another apple, another pecan, and a sand cherry that I formed into a tree, a cherry. This one's been chewed on. This is several years old. The deer keep chewing this one down on me. This is pond 2 right here. And we've been going up a little bit in elevation. So the spillway for pond 2 goes right over this location here, goes between those two lines and goes into the sediment connecting canal system down there. This is another swale. I'll be working on this hopefully next year. I'm just so far behind. But this one is at the same level as the swale that runs alongside of the driveway. But we are going uphill as we're walking here, but the base of the swale is low down there. And that drains underneath the ground down here into the sediment collecting canal system. Here's one of the embarrassing things here in this part of the second food forest. Some of these multiflora rose bushes here have overtaken, and down in there is still one of the service berries. Here we've got a maple next to one of the service berries in here. And this is a pretty steep bank here. I should not have put it in so steep. Here's one of the service berries here. One of the service berries here. They're still in cages here. I've got a lot of work to try and get this area cleaned out. A lot of the native blackberry plants, real thorny ones, are in here. Some poplars, but there's all service berries that I put in here. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I made a video about these buggers, putting them in and all, but I got too steep of a bank there, so that was a big mistake on my part. I've got a dead ash tree that I was going to take down this year. Hopefully I'll get to it. Now we have a row of apple trees, different varieties of apple trees. This is where I just took off some of the tree tubes, so I've got some work to deal with it. But just a row of different apple trees here. This one was leaning, So I just drove a T-post in this morning and put a couple of bungee cords around it to help hold it up here. All different varieties of apple trees. And I have a lot of pruning to do yet here. So we came up from where the house is. We saw a swale system there where all these service berries have been overgrown. You could see a couple of them look pretty decent there. Here are a few persimmons, because that's our big female persimmons tree that gives us so much fruit each year. There is another persimmons right over there, another female there. Next to the staghorn sumac is an apple tree right here, a pear tree. These are root suckers coming up from the persimmons right over here. Some more of the root suckers in here. So I'm going to try and divide some of these out and propagate more of them. Right over here we have an apple tree that's basically, they're about 10 feet apart, about 10 feet apart, and they're just too close when I put these in here. So I've got an apple tree here, a honey locust right here, a cherry tree right here. That's a volunteer ash tree right there, a small pecan, a honey locust, another apple tree, a pear tree. There's a pear tree right here, another apple tree. And one thing I would say is on the other side of this mound that these trees are on right now is a deep swale, because our property, so that direction is to the east, that's north, and that's west. Our property has a significant slope going from the northeast to the southwest. And so as we cut these swales in, instead of following the contour, we decided to avoid all the trees that we wanted to save, which we were successful with. And we went to the other desirable locations, which means keeping the bottom of the swales nice and level, but it means you're cutting into the hillside as we go uphill. And I would have done things differently. I still would have put the swales not on contour, but the same way that we did do, but I would have scoped the downhill side of the swales systems instead of having the mounds there. I hope that makes sense. Here's a Siberian pea shrub here going to seed. Another honey locust here, a cherry tree, honey locust, a pecan, another pecan, and there's another honey locust in between. Another honey locust here, pecan, honey locust, peach tree, poison ivy on this maple. So we just looked at this section in here. Service berries completely engulfed by weeds. So that's one of the things I'm going to try and get to. I've been working on these trees, taking off the tree tubes today. I've got to prune them. It'd be great if I could address and mulch around the base of them. I won't get to that. Oh, and I forgot to mention, the way I'm doing things now is I have the tree tubes on for a couple of years, so that forces the branches, instead of coming out on the angle that they would, so this was about a 45, this was far less than a 45 here, and that can cause the tree to split. But what I'll do is I'll follow up a couple internodes, and where there's a node that's facing out in this direction, I'll prune that off here, and this will send out a couple of branches off to the side. And although that's the opposite of the way that I would do things in the past, but nowadays, because of the deer browse, the natural deer browse, as these trees get bigger, this keeps the deer not it will allow them to browse with the branches coming out laterally all the way around, but it decreases the damage from deer rub when the antlers when they're when they're going ahead and rutting and trying to destroy my trees. So by having lower branches that they're constantly pruning, that's okay. And I'll just make it so that I select the node where the leaf is going to come out in the most desirable location. I hope that makes sense. So I won't have these trees' limbs rubbing against each other like these ones will do. But I purposely left them to this point. Now I may, like this would be ideal if it were a little bit lower, because there's going to be rub here during the high winds. So I'll prune it down here, prune both of these down low, and force them to send out their perpendicular shoots out to the side. Hope that makes sense. All right. Around the trees, there's various different nitrogen fixers. There's lilac bushes, flowering trees, ornamental grasses and all. Curly willows. Those are some of the curly willows that we have here. And this pond, I'll just mention this. This pond, although during our bad droughts it'll go down a couple of feet, but because there's large hugelkultur mounds into the ground beneath these areas, the water is sequestered in those hugelkultur mounds, and it helps to replenish this whole pond, or maintain the water level, despite this all being gravel here. Okay, so once we get past those trees over there, we'll get over there in a minute. That's part of the third food forest up there. We won't go through that in this video. So, as you can see, got lots of weeds, lots of grapevines here, and that's the height of the mound next to the swale system here. So this was a much steeper slope previously. A couple of years ago, probably 3 years ago, I went ahead and really made this a much more gradual slope. Here are our 2 rows of hazelnut bushes, so I'll go in the center between those. And one of the things, these hazelnuts, they grow like gang-fires. They grow slowly initially, but then they grow like gangbusters under the ideal conditions after a couple years of having them. So these ones are getting a little more sunshine, but the canopy is getting much more filled out. So we got a maple here, a weeping willow here, and so you could see the shadow on the ground around here. So some of the hazelnuts don't do as well. So that's one of the things I've learned. Anything that's in the shade, they don't do as well as the rest of them do. But we'll take a look at these. I'm real happy with how the hazelnuts are doing this year. They did fantastic last year. And of course they do get large enough, and as they're developing their nuts, they do start to fall over. So here we're getting out into an area where the full sun is, and you can see the size of these, and they just get loaded with the nuts. Absolutely loaded. As you can see, there is some bindweed that gets into these buggers, drives me nuts. But they really do hold their own against all the weeds. Some of these limbs get so heavy with the nuts and just fall right over. Okay, so the other section over there we just went through a couple moments ago. This is the slope that we gradually changed. That's the big persimmons there. The apples, the pears, the pecans, all along in there. These are the 2 rows of hazelnuts. This is one of our mulberry trees here. The birds get to these ones before we ever get those. When they're down low, I get some of them. A honey locust right here. An apple tree here. I've got to remove these cages around all these trees. Hopefully I'll get to that this season. Honey locust, red maple here. I don't remember what that was. There's an apple tree inside of the mugwort in here. Another red maple here. And this I had been gradually building up the wood chips until the wood chip supplies ran out. Another apple here. Honey locust. Pecan that got snapped off in a windstorm. This one was one of the, I think this was one of the cherries. There's a pear, an apple. Really thick mess. One of the red buds here. Apple here. There's a red bud. Here's an example how they snap right off. Winds just get so powerful here. I lose so many of them. Another apple. One of the maples we avoided catching the roots here. Another apple here. I lost a cherry here. It's a honey locust. A spruce here. This is one of our service berries here. One of my favorite peach trees. A deer rubbed this last winter. That's why I'm leaving these lower branches out to the side after they get a little bit thicker. One of our apples here. Really needs some pruning. Another service berry in here. A red bud that I'm pruning these red buds. Instead of growing up into be trees, I'm making them into bushes. So this is one I started growing in another location, and last spring, I think it was last spring, I transplanted it up here, but I pruned it again so it'd be more of a bush, and these aren't as affected by the storms. Over there is the third food forest. We won't go quite to there. And you can hopefully hear the birds. The birds make such an impact on everything around here. They really help to keep the pests under control, help out with the beneficial insects. So we basically have one row here of these grapevines that we're going to go to in a moment. Mostly ornamental trees in this area, and and another set of trees on the other side of the swale, the blue spruces, and then the chestnuts and the tupelo on the other side of those blue spruce trees. So here's a catawba tree, a butternut, a persimmons, a catawba, crabapple, flowering pear. Our grapevines here, and I haven't gotten up here and pruned these things yet. I've got to prune them. They're much more susceptible to brown rot when all their vines are going down to the ground and all the grasses and weeds are making their way up here. I should have pruned them last fall and I didn't. A catawba here, honey locust there. And once I get up there, I'll actually go to the other side so you can see. Flowering crabapple, flowering pear tree, flowering crabapple, Another crabapple. So here we got the mugwort working their way up in here. I've got to get up here and do some work. These grapes won't do as well with all of these weeds engulfing them. Another flowering crabapple here, and it's got the multiflora rose below it. One of our beautiful maple trees. There's our driveway entrance up here with a couple of weeping mulberries. Won't go over there now. So now here we are with the blue spruces here. I'm going to end up pruning all of the lower branches off of here because we have a fungal disease that's affecting some of these. Pecan here, honey locust, catawba tree. Show you some of the flowers. Look a bit like an orchid. I have to get in here and prune. Honey locust. This is what happens to the lower branches when that fungus works its way up. And then I have a lot of other trees, and these are the tree tubes there for some of the chestnuts and the tupelo. What do we have here? I'm not sure what that one is right now, to tell you the truth. Honey locust, spruce, butternut, honey locust. The windstorms knocked down so many of our trees around here, that strong winds out of the west. Honey locust. Here's one of the English oak trees that I transplanted about a little over a month ago. And I believe that we only have one that didn't make it. And that's this one here. I'll look and see if there's any part of it that's alive down there. But that's one of the catawbas, the flowering crab apples, flowering pear there that we just walked down that path. Honey locust here. The vines are just overtaking some of my spruces here. There's one of the hybrid Chinese chestnuts. That's the one you may be able to see a 2x2 that I staked that one up today. It was leaning over. And here's another one of the English oaks that I transplanted this spring. I haven't watered any of them. Here's one of the catawba trees with the beautiful flowers. You can see it's being pollinated right now. Is that one of my persimmons? Yes. Another butternut. And you see the grapevines are just completely engulfing these. So I've got to get up here and work on these. Another catawba. And then at this point we get down into the third food forest, which I don't want to go to today because I'll be forever going through this stuff. So that's a walk through some of the second food forest. The third food forest is just a bit newer than this one. Isn't as mature. The first food forest is the most mature. That was the first one I put in. This was the second one, the one we just saw, and the third one's a newer one. So it's very similar to the trees, and it's up by pond 1. So I think that's about it. I need to get back to work in the second food forest and see if I can get a little bit more accomplished today, maybe getting some of the pruning done, and then decide what I'm going to do from there. So if you found this video of value, please give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And by all means, folks, stay safe and take good care of yourselves. Bye-bye now. That's it. Make noise, Gimbal.